It's time for the Chapter and Chatter Cafe with Camden County Library District Director, Professor Jim Paisley.
Good morning. Welcome to the latest edition of Chapter and Chatter here at the Camdenton Library. Now we got a few little changes here this time. Our friend KB, he's been able to find himself a position with the radio world out there, and so he won't be doing the show anymore with us. Occasionally we'll try and get him in as a guest, but things just got better. We have none other than Coley here. She is going to fill in his shoes. She is our marketing director here at the library, and so she'll be able to keep us even better informed on all the great things we're doing down here. And this episode, we're going to tackle something pretty interesting, and that's Venezuela.
Venezuela.
So tell me everything you know about Venezuela.
It's in South America?
Very good, very good. See?
It's at the top?
Yeah, there you go. It's at the top, right. Well, it is fascinating in that what's happened here, Venezuela is one of those things, it's kind of like Cuba was. It's hanging out there. It's not something that we really want going on with their ties to Russia and Iran and China. And yet, here we are, we're seeing ourselves dealing with this group. Now, first off, in talking about Venezuela, what I want to do is I want to wish everybody here a Merry Christmas.
Oh,
Merry Christmas.
Early.
No, it's not.
No, it is.
Because what happened here is that the president of Venezuela, who's having all kinds of problems in a kind of a corrupt regime that he has, and we'll talk about it at the latest election, people are mad. They're not happy at all. That's a lot of these, you hear about these Venezuelans coming to America and we're having all these problems with them. Well, the reason they're leaving is because of the problems they have there. And their leader, in his infinite wisdom, Nicolas Maduro, he decided that, nobody's ever mad at Christmas. And so he decided we're going to change Christmas. Christmas in Venezuela has now been declared for October 1st of this year. And again, his reasoning was, everybody's so mad and everything. I think, you can smell Christmas in the air, he said.
Yes, but how do his people think about that?
Well, his people who are huddled around a campfire eating, whatever they can find out of a dumpster somewhere, they're not quite in the Christmas spirit yet.
Oh, I don't blame him.
But he's cheering them on, and he said, just trust me, this is going to be wonderful. And he's doing it as a thanks to the people. So Merry Christmas, everyone. There you go. And surely that'll fix it. It's not at all unlike some of the politicians in the past, where they come and promise you, a chicken in every pot. Well, here you get Christmas in October. Now, he didn't say how long it would last.
I was going to say, how long is it going to last? Does that supersede all other holidays now? So is this going to be a continued thing or just a one-time?
We're just going to have to stay tuned and find out.
All right.
So he's going to move the holiday up for you. Now, here's the thing. This guy, in having done that, they were interviewing some of the people there in Caracas, Venezuela, and one of them said, without any money and with all this political crisis, who can believe that there'll be an early Christmas? Another one went on to say he thinks he's so powerful that he can just change the date that Christ was born. And so, they were saying this shows just how much power this guy thinks he truly has.
Oh.
Now, what happened is the announcement follows an international condemnation of this ruler, this guy, Nicolas Maduro. What happened is they held an election, and his opposition got 80% of the vote. But this guy has control of the Supreme Court. He has control of the assembly that handles all the elections. And he has control of the military. So he held an election, but he said, I don't believe anything you see. I won, hands down. And he had his entire government backing him. Now, the people all know that was wrong, but he went ahead anyhow. And so basically what we see is even the U.S. State Department has come out and said the will of the people needs to be respected. But now what are you going to do with this guy? I don't know how many of you saw the news this morning. Maduro actually arrested another American. He's got 4 now. And this has happened over the past 3 days, so we've been revising notes here. But basically, you know, he's saying these are spies that have been sent in to try and figure out how to oust him out of power, okay? So he's got complete control, and he's just going to run this whole country with a bully pulpit. And, you know, God help you if you come up against him in any way, you know.
Right.
So next thing that happens is I think we need to go to a little bit of history here. In 1999, okay, we'll go back a little bit, not too far, just a little. Venezuela had been run by two people, just two, okay? The first one was a guy that I'm sure you all have heard of, Hugo Chavez. You ever hear of him? Okay. Hugo Chavez was the dictator over Venezuela prior to Nicolas Maduro. Nicolas Maduro was his second in command. So Chavez ran the country from 99 until 2013, and then Maduro took over.
So there was no voting in that process. It was
there was a vote. Are you kidding? Of course we had a vote.
Oh, did we?
It was very similar to the one we just had.
Oh, okay.
But,
I
you know,
kind of thought that's what we were going with that, but I wasn't for sure.
You know, yeah, it's not like he's going off on a tangent somewhere, you know, and no, you know, the people love him. And so, you know, the results came in, and ta-da, there it is, okay? So you can see, you know, even in our country, we worry about having a fair and balanced election, et cetera. Well, and in that country, can you imagine if the powers that be that ran everything had control of the election?
You know.
Yeah, I know.
Not very democratic.
No, not very. But now what you have is, you know, and you can imagine the people when they saw that this Maduro fellow was coming in behind Chavez, they thought all hope is lost. Now we're right where we were before.
Right.
And this is what sprang forth all of these revolutions and all this chaos there in Venezuela. And that's a big reason why these people are fleeing that country and coming to America.
Gotcha.
What they have at home is worse than it could possibly be. Now, basically, the government of Venezuela is a socialist party, okay? Now, again, socialism and communism. Socialism is something that happens over a long period of time, but it has the same end result as communism. Communism is just socialism at the end of a barrel of a gun. We're going to do it tomorrow.
Gotcha.
Okay, so by all rights, you could say this is a communist takeover. But it's been stretched out since '99, so they're calling themselves socialists, and they're in it to help all the poor people of Venezuela.
Do the poor people say it that way?
No.
Didn't think so.
No. And bear in mind, the way you wind up gaining control of the Supreme Court and the Electoral Council and the military is you make sure they're taken care of first.
So like the Supreme Court, their Supreme Court, are they voted in, or are they appointed, or?
They're appointed, but the Electoral Council is appointed by Maduro.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's kind of a fixed setup, to say the least, right? Now, needless to say, Maduro is all-powerful. And not long after Maduro was elected, global oil prices plummeted. Now, this is where everything went in the tank for them. They were one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Skyscrapers, more money, you know, driving the Maseratis, the whole bit. They're living high on the hog. They were very similar to, you know, having the power that the Saudis have.
That's what I was going to ask, so like Dubai or...
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. And so what happened is things are going great until the market crashes on oil. And now all of a sudden, that's all they had was oil, okay? And so when that dried up, now they're in trouble.
Right, they have no backup.
And so who did they turn to for help?
Maduro.
Russia and China and Iran. And those three countries have been in there backing this guy, making sure that he stays in power. Now, the only people that he's selling oil to now are those three major powers. And basically what he had done is he had this company that, the main oil company, which was controlled by the government, you know, they're going belly up. And so what happened is Russia stepped in and started kind of subsidizing these guys. And China stepped in and subsidized them. Well, the next thing you know, they're in debt to the tune of trillions of dollars to Russia and China. And in doing so, that puts China and Russia basically using Venezuela as a puppet.
Right.
This is where we stand today. This is a real problem, okay? Now, with the executive and judiciary branches of the government, in control, basically Venezuela's opposition parties really didn't have much of a chance at all. They're kind of like Ross Perot coming up and trying to knock everything out of kilter. It's just not going to happen, all right? Now, it gets a little confusing when you start trying to follow who the players are. Basically, everybody in the world is saying Maduro's election is crooked, that he stuffed the ballot box, made up his own deal. Go figure, right?
Right.
And basically, he's saying, no, it was a fair election, everything's fair. Well, the opposition party was led by a guy by the name of Guaido, Juan Guaido. And Guaido says, well, I'm just going to declare myself the president. So now you got Maduro and you got Guaido. Maduro has the military and all the bigwigs.
So what's the point of an election?
There isn't.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's
so
where
I
they're
just
at.
go down to Venezuela and say, hey, I'm president?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's basically what he did. And everybody's like, yay, and we'll get behind this Guaido guy. Well, more than 50 countries jumped in and said, absolutely, Maduro's out, this guy should be the new president. But the problem was, is once he got in there, he didn't have control of anything. He didn't have control of the Supreme Court or the government or the military, so he was president in name only.
Right.
And Maduro the whole time is saying, no, I'm the president.
Right.
All right. Now, needless to say, this is where you have some of the old communist tricks of where you go around and you knock on the door and say, Mr. Guaido, would you come out here for a minute? And next thing you know, you're in handcuffs and you're carted off and adios. Okay? And
scary.
so it's one way of handling the opposition, right? Now, poverty is probably the biggest problem that they have in Venezuela. And understand, this is a country where the people were living high on the hog. I mean, they had more money than you could shake a stick at. Everybody was eating well, they had vehicles, everybody had a job, everything was great, and then the market crashed. And now here they are. So extreme poverty basically becomes the key issue here. The people are at a point where they find themselves, destitute. And so what are you going to do? The only thing they could do was flee the country. And that's why we're seeing literally tens of thousands of them have fled the country in the hopes of making a better life for themselves.
Right.
And, again, this is one of those things where we talk about, well, we need to get to the root cause of why all the immigration is taking place. Well, this is one example. Can you imagine how hard it must be to come in there and say, okay, so how do we fix this? Legally.
Right.
Yes, and see, therein lies the problem. I'd be willing to bet you dollars to donuts that those 4 guys that were down there just got arrested that were from the U.S. probably were thinking they might have a plan for getting rid of this guy. Gone, all right? Now, interestingly enough, people got so disillusioned with this Juan Guaido, the guy that came out of the woodwork and said he was the new president, that they eventually said, to heck with him. And in October of 2023, the opposition organized a primary election. They said, well, we'll see if we can find somebody else to put in there, all right? So they held a primary first in order to pick somebody who could be president to run against Maduro.
Right.
All right? Well, there was a lawmaker by the name of Maria Machado, and she won by a landslide. This is the election you hear about. 80% of the vote she got. All right? So it's like, ta-da, there it is, we've got her, hallelujah. And Maduro says, no, I don't care if she got 80% of the vote or not. And so they come to the world stage, the UN, all of them, they come to Maduro and say, show us the results. They're around here somewhere. We'll have to see if we can find them.
I was going to say, why can't they just do a recount or,
Well, again, he has control of the electoral group that collects the votes.
So they just got shredded? Or
don't know where they went,
Gotcha.
But I'd be willing to bet you that, the shredder
they're
machines
somewhere?
were running overtime, to say the least.
When they
right?
put their ballot in the box,
Yeah.
it got shredded right away. Is that what it was?
Exactly. Now, this poor gal, Machado, next thing you know, there's a warrant out for her arrest, okay? So it would be like, I'm trying to give you an example without getting politically in trouble. It would be like if you had your opponent and you drug them into court and accused them of all kinds of things, and all of a sudden they're out the door and can't run as an opposition to the president.
So really, she didn't do anything wrong. He just...
Yes. because he has the Supreme Court.
And everybody else behind
and
him.
everybody else behind him.
Gotcha.
And he has the military that he can send out to get you. Knock on your door, and out the door you go.
That's even scarier.
Now, needless to say, the Electoral Council immediately declared that Maduro is by all rights, the declared president. And so, even in the primary, they had stacked the ballot to make sure nobody would run against him. All right? Now, the announcement of Maduro's presidency this second time, it set off all kinds of deadly protests in Caracas. And this is what you saw in the news. You know, it's been about, probably 6-8 months ago. And you remember you saw those people in the streets and they're flinging, Molotov cocktails and everybody's raising all kinds of hell. And then they had the military come in. That's what it was about. Because what had happened was they'd already held the election. This gal had won by 80%, and Maduro just ignored it. And so the people were fit to be tied, okay? Now, interestingly enough, it's while all this turmoil is taking place that China, Russia, and Iran all come running to the aid of Maduro. They want him in there. They love the fact that here's somebody in our hemisphere that, is willing to buddy up with those three, and it's a huge problem. Iran is using Venezuela as a path to bring people in, terrorists in, and smuggle them on up. When we see all these immigrants coming across the border, how many of the Venezuelans who are coming out of there are people from Iran that came through Venezuela and channeled up that way. China's in it because they have oil, okay? And China is the biggest purchaser of Venezuelan oil. Russia, same thing. They're loving this. This is great. This is like having another Cuba. Here they are. They have a base of operations right there in our hemisphere, and they've actually sent ships and military personnel into Venezuela to help maintain it for Maduro. And so you can see, even though Venezuela is just this little problem, on the map, the little blip on the map, it's the players that are using Venezuela. There is where we need to keep our eyes open. And that's why I encourage everybody that's watching, when you watch the news and a little blip comes up like this, like it did just this morning about arresting another American in Venezuela, take the time to do some research and look at it and say, well, what's that all about? And as you dig, you'll start to see it's a lot bigger than it appears. Now, one of the analyst, a U.S. diplomat by the name of Tom Shannon, he said there's two ways this could go. One is that the Nicaragua model, which is simply Maduro will become a dictator.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is that the next
Yes, and just
step,
say,
basically,
this is the way it is, and we'll line people up, and we'll just shoot them if they don't get along, all right? The other side of this is the Romanian model. And they call it the Romanian model because it ties all the way back years ago to a revolution that took place in Romania by a guy by the name of Nicolae Ceausescu. He was this evil ruler of their country, and the people rose up and actually executed him. So they're saying it's going to go one or two ways. We're either going to leave Maduro in there and let him be a dictator, or the people are going to rise up and they're going to have a civil war on their hands.
I could see that.
Yeah. The problem is when you're starving to death and you don't have any way to communicate with one another and organize, coming up against an established military backed by Russia, your odds aren't very good.
No.
Now, again, one thing they have going for them is they have the backing of all of these other countries. But those other countries, we've already seen, how willing are they to jump in to this type of a conflict?
Right.
With all the things going on in the world, do we want to jump in
right,
to a civil war?
That you want to upset.
Exactly, exactly. And so bottom line is that now Maduro indeed has just put the hammer down. He's going around and just simply kicking in doors at night, and anybody that speaks out against him, they're gone. They just disappear. He's even gone so far that flights that, people are fleeing the country, they'll get on a flight and get out of there. They'll arrest them out of the country. They'll fly to Berlin to try and get away.
Yeah.
There'll be Venezuelan agents waiting for them.
On the other side.
On the other side. So you can run, but you can't hide. Obviously. The jails are jammed full of protesters, okay, and especially anybody in the media. Now, basically, it's the support from Russia and China that experts say has been key to Maduro's ability to basically maintain control, all right? Now, the interesting thing is that these two countries, again, they're in it for themselves. They're not in it for Venezuela or for the Venezuelan people. China's in there.
That's all for them.
Yeah,
What they can get for themselves.
what they
out of
can
this.
get for themselves out of it. Russia, like I say, they love having control of something right there just on, at our southern border, okay? Now, on June the 28th, the Maduro government actually had a big celebration, celebrating 46 years of fruitful, he said, fruitful and unbreakable diplomatic relations between Venezuela and China. Wonderful people, all right? Now, I got to ask myself, see, they're head over heels in debt, Venezuela is, to Russia and China.
Right.
And what's happened is they've decided, well, we don't have any money to pay these guys. We owe them. So what they're doing is Venezuela is actually paying China and Russia in crude oil instead of cash. They don't have it. So basically, China and Russia are also getting the benefit of getting free oil out of this. Well, not really free, but they paid earlier for it. They're getting something out of it.
Right.
So now they find themselves, in a situation, even Venezuela's in a situation, well, we owe them so much money, we're going to have to just work and drill and provide the oil to them to pay off our debt, which they will never do.
I was going to say they're never, it's an
Right.
endless situation.
Yes. If you're in debt to China and Russia, guess what? It'd be kind of like...
You're going to be there forever.
Yes, yeah. There's an interest rate involved, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of one.
Yeah.
I'd hate to see what that percentage is.
So Maduro finds himself trying to do this, trying to pay off his debts to them with oil. Now, there's a problem with that because we put sanctions under the, I guess it would have been under the Trump administration, we put sanctions on Venezuela. We said, no oil in, no oil out. We're trying to get this guy out of there. And, we're not sending them food, we're not sending them anything. And just recently, in the last 6 months, the current administration lifted those sanctions. And they did it on the guise of the fact that people are starving to death. The plight of the people became a bigger issue.
Right.
And they said, well, we can't just stand by and idly watch the entire country of Venezuela, all the population, die. Plus, they said, those people are coming here, and we're going to have to take care of them here. So we might as well lift the sanctions and let them get supplies that they need in the hopes that they'll stay there and not come crashing across our border. Well, in order to do this, when we lifted those sanctions, a big problem is that we had them completely isolated and wouldn't let any ships come in to pick up oil and go out to Russia or China. That was part of the sanctions. And the way they were doing it is Russia would simply come in, they'd take the transponder off their oil tanker, they'd raise a different flag, and then they'd come into the port, load the thing up full of oil, and then go back out. We knew they were doing it, but you know how that goes. Now, it's willy-nilly. They're exporting that oil, like I say, primarily to Russia and to China. And that's how they're staying afloat right now. With the sanctions in place, we were seizing a lot of those shipments. And that put the hurts not only on Venezuela, but also Russia and China.
Right.
So you can see all of these things, everything you do is triggering things on a global basis, not just Venezuela.
Right, and just not that one
And
select
I think
area.
that's probably the biggest fault that we have right now. We're looking at it as Venezuela, when in reality, when you have Iran, China, and Russia involved, any actions that either side takes has an impact on the others. Okay?
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does make
Yeah.
sense.
Now, Russia. In addition to the economic assistance, Russia has provided important political support to the Maduro government. And it's been kind of interesting, and even Mike Pompeo claimed that Maduro had at one time prepared to flee to Cuba. He was going to get out of there because there was so much opposition. But what happened is Putin stepped in, came and talked to Maduro and says, relax, dude, I got this. We'll bring in a Russian Navy, one of our little tours, and we'll leave some of our guys there. And so Russia is actually, their military is embedded with the Venezuelan National Guard now. They're running the show. And so again, to take up arms against Venezuela's National Guard, you could trigger something with Russia. As you dig deeper and deeper, it gets more and more complicated, okay? Now, Russian authorities have also met publicly with Maduro several times in recent years, okay? So he's playing the game with them, okay? Right. So you're not dealing with just one individual. Now, it's in part because Venezuela is a strategic, political, and economic partner that the United States is so worried about them. Again, bear in mind where this thing is. They're on our southern border, basically. And, it's very similar, like I was saying, to what we ran into with Cuba and the Cuban Missile Crisis when Kennedy was in there. It's one of those, good grief, if Russia gets in there and sets up their missile systems, what are we going to do? So it's a huge issue. In addition to Russia, you got China. Now, China, too, has been a critical ally for the Maduro government. And, basically, China wields a lot of clout, just like Russia does, because those two guys are on the UN Security Council. The UN Security Council is made up of 5 permanent members, of which Russia and China are 2 of them. So, and all decisions by the UN Security Council have to be unanimous. So anytime the UN gets together and says, we need to get that clown out down there, guess what? 2 vetoes, Russia and China. And so it's a deadlock coming at it diplomatically as well. I mean, everywhere you turn, because of all the players involved, you find yourself handcuffed. It's a mess. Now, in addition to that, Venezuela, working with China, came up with a wonderful system. It's called the Homeland Card. Homeland Card. It's a card that you carry around with you, okay? Now, the card, basically, you have to have this card in order to buy food, gasoline, medicine. Any purchases you make, you have to show your Homeland Card, okay? Now, where did they get it? China. China invented this. This is technology at its best. My buddy Mark is sitting out here running our technology. Oh, he'd love something like this because you can track everybody. Wherever you go, whatever you do, whatever you buy, you have your little card, okay? And China basically gave this to Maduro and said, you ought to try this. This works pretty good. You want to know where all your ne'er-do-wells are? Yeah.
Sorry, that's just...
Isn't that great?
Yeah, that's what I want.
And so everybody has the little card, and they're tracking them, okay? Now, they even instituted a new program with it. It was Operation Knock Knock, they called it. Knock Knock. And you can imagine that's just what it was.
The name's
in the middle of the night, knock knock, who's there, right? And the who's there was not good. Not good at all. Yes. What do you mean, who's there? Yeah. Who are you, right? Yeah. I said, do you have your card? Yeah, yes. Well, come with me. And so this Operation Knock Knock, it's just one step further. You're living in the streets. You're miserable. You haven't eaten. And do you have your card? As long as you have your card, okay, here we go. All right. And again, China is the one that provided this to Maduro. If you live in China, you have to have a card too. And so it just basically takes complete control of your lives. So again, think about this, folks. Would you stay there? Would you stay in that country?
No.
No. I'd run as quick as I could, all right? So the final leg on this stool is Iran. Now, in April, President Biden chose to revoke these temporary sanctions that we had in place, all right? But in the 6 months while these sanctions had been in place, what had happened was, or that they had been waived, here comes this huge influx of Iranians into Venezuela. Again, the idea is that you have these terrorist organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas and so on and so forth. Contrary to popular belief, you can't just hop on a flight in Tehran and land in New York. You got to figure out a way to get here. And what happened is Venezuela opened the door for all of these different terrorist organizations. And so what they do is they would get a direct flight into Venezuela, then from Venezuela join up with all of these massive amounts of immigrants who are flowing up through Central America and through Mexico and coming to our border. And so it opened up a pipeline, if you will, for terrorists to get in. It's a long pipeline.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
But when there's no vetting at all,
right,
there you have it. And like I say, Maduro is welcoming them in with open arms. So you have China, you have Russia, and you have Iran. All three are basically controlling this whole area with a dictator in charge.
Right.
Yeah, it's almost frightening when you think about it.
Very.
Some of the things that they've found, some of these Iranian groups, these terrorist groups that have come in, have had plots for assassinations of government leaders worldwide, not just in the United States, but plots to take out the president of Mexico, plots to take out members of our Congress, so on and so forth. And when those few times where we do catch them, inevitably we find out that the pipeline that got them here was through Venezuela and up into the country. Okay? So it's frightening when you step back and think about it. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't basically talk real quick about the parallels. We've done this before. You always hear me say history repeats itself. Well, here it is. In his national address during the Cuban Missile Crisis, none other than President John F. Kennedy, he called the Soviet Union's decision to put strategic missiles in Cuba. He said it's a deliberately provocative and unjustified change in the status quo which cannot be accepted by this country if our courage and our commitments are ever to be trusted again by either friend or foe. Now, the principle that Kennedy was putting forward there is that the foundation of the United States' credibility is based on our ability to defend ourselves. The rest of the world is looking at us, and they're saying, look what you're doing. You're allowing all of these people to come in here. You're allowing Maduro to still stay in power, and you're allowing 20 million people to come across your border. That doesn't send a very good message that, hey, the United States has got a handle on this thing. And like I say, you can go all the way back to Kennedy and make the comparison, okay? And as we all know, Kennedy brought us about as close as you could possibly get to nuclear war, but he stood his ground.
Right.
And I think inevitably what's going to happen is the United States is going to have to take a stand with Maduro. They're going to have to say enough. And like I say, the issue is when you do that, you're going to have to be willing to stand up to both China, Russia, and Iran as well in the same process. So that's basically what I've got. And like I say, the big thing here, folks, is, I encourage you, go to our local libraries. We've pulled a lot of books from the shelves and review a little bit of this history. A lot of it's recent history. Look at the periodicals. Look at the newspapers that we have. A lot of this is happening as we speak. But again, I think it's critical that you understand the background of Venezuela and how we got to where we are today and the consequences of what actions will be taken in the near future.
Right. Well, like you said, the references that we have here, we have the books, we have the magazines, we have the newspapers. Another way we have that is our online newspapers. We have access to the 5 major dailies that are respected news sources throughout the country and even internationally. You've got your New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and all those. Another thing that, as you as a professor know, and as a student, that when you do your research. Don't just stop at one and say that is the only thing that counts. Dig deeper, go further, and cross-reference those authors that have written that as well. See what else they have written, or even who else has picked up their writings. So we do have that. That's all with your library card. I mean, this is a free service to you. You do not have to pay any subscription fees to this service here. You just plug in your library card number and you have access to these 5 major dailies. Also, with those, as a student, if you're writing a paper, it gets frustrating. Again, as a professor,
Yeah.
When you're searching these like the New York Times, you get 5 free articles a month. So when you're writing a paper, those 5 free articles go quick.
Right.
And what's nice about the 5 major dailies here is that it has full text articles clear back to the 1980s.
That's
that they
a
have
key
archived.
point. I get so frustrated sometimes. I'm sure you've all done it. It gives you that tagline and you think, oh, I want to read this article.
Oh.
And then you read so far down and then it says, would you like to subscribe? No, I just want to read the rest of the article.
Right, but that's where even working here, you kind of forget about that when you're trying to search something. And then I go, oh, wait a minute here. I can finish reading that. And all I have to do in the search bar is put in that article title, and it will pull it up, and then you can continue reading it there. It's all full text. There's not any pictures, but it is all full text. And then like the Wall Street Journal magazine and the New York Times book review, you can read those on there as well.
Well, and this is another key point, Coley, that you bring up, is that one of the things that is involved here running the library is we pick up the tab. Well, the public does, but we subscribe to these things for you. And so the subscriptions, we have subscriptions to all sorts of different apps like this, things that provide all of this wealth of knowledge to the public so that you don't have to do it on your own. You don't have to be a member of a particular subscription for your use. All you got to do is use your library card, and we're paying for the subscriptions for everybody.
Right.
And that's a huge plus. I use it all the time. I really do.
Well, even if you look at our receipts now for when you check out a book, it will tell you how much you saved. So think about this. How much would you pay for each one of those subscriptions, do you think?
Oh, my God,
a year?
yeah.
I mean,
Huge.
unless you get the special introductory price. I mean, what is it?
Well,
they tell you $1.
I love the introductory price.
Right.
It's only $1, and then 6 months later, it's $35 a month. You're going, wait. That's when the wife comes to me and says, what did you do?
Nothing.
I don't know. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So that's a great point.
Do take advantage of these things. I mean, that's why we do have them. And do your research, like Jim said. It helps when you do your research. You find different points of view, and you can base your own thoughts and opinions on that as well. So,
what else do you have for us that you could share some of the things that we're doing?
How about book clubs? Do you
Book clubs,
You don't
yes.
like to read, do you, Jim?
Oh, no, not at all.
Not at all? Not at all. Glad you work at the library.
That's right. That's right.
We actually have several book clubs happening around in our branches. Each one of our branches has at least one book club. So Camdenton, we'll just kind of run down the list. Camdenton is our Big Niangua Book Club. It meets on the fourth Wednesday of each month at 12:30. And actually their next meeting is Wednesday, September 25th at 12:30, and they will be discussing Isis Crawford's book, A Catered Tea Party. The next thing that we've got coming up is, I'm kind of actually looking forward to this. I don't have a 12 or 14-year-old anymore, but we are starting a teen fiction book club for 12 to 14-year-olds.
Good.
So I'm kind of excited to see how that's going to turn out. And I believe Karen said that we already have a couple of people signed up for that. Yay. So I'm excited for that one. The other one, I got to make sure I say it right, because otherwise I'm going to be thinking the Breakfast Club and not the Book Fest Club. Sorry, the Brat Pack's not going to be there, guys.
There you go, yeah.
But that one starts October 9th. It's a Wednesday at 4 p.m., and they will be discussing different genres of books. Really, it's not one set genre. So if you want to explore a new genre, this is the way to do it. You know, not every month is going to be the same genre.
Right.
Let's see here. The Climax Springs Library, they offer an overbooked book club. And with that one's kind of a free choice type thing. They kind of provide the theme, but then you can choose how your book title fits that theme. Wow. So like for October, it's a monster theme. So you could go the traditional route of Frankenstein, or you could go Maduro.
Right.
He's
exactly.
a monster.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're right. So modern monsters.
Right.
Yes.
See, it's all interpretation. So,
right.
and then it would open up the lines of communication again,
sure.
discussions. So their next one is October 16th at 2 p.m. The Max Creek Library offers a First Reads book club. You would think that'd be like a first series. It's actually on the first Wednesday of each month. So that's why they call it First Reads. Okay. They're actually going to be just discussing Jodi Picoult's book, A Spark of Light, on October 4th at 2 p.m. Then the Osage Beach Library's Hooked on Books meets on the third Thursday of each month at 11:30. And they're actually meeting later today, and they're going to be discussing Amanda Cox's book, He Should Have Told the Bees. So, Stoutland, they meet on the third Tuesday of every month, and theirs is a kind of an odd time, but it kind of makes you remember what time it is. It's at 6:15 in the evening. So, I'm not sure what they're going to be discussing, but we'll find out, and I'll get that posted for you guys.
Great.
The Page Turners Book Club at the Sunrise Beach Library meets on the third Wednesday of each month at 1:30, and their next meeting will also be on October 16th, and they will discuss Crow Mary by Kathleen Grissom. So all these book titles are usually posted on our Facebook and Instagram feeds. So It usually has links to where you can get copies of the book, usually Missouri Evergreen, Missouri Libraries to Go, or even Hoopla, depending on who has the book. Most of the times it's going to be Missouri Libraries to Go, Missouri Evergreen, or Card Catalog. And then second place is usually Libby app, and then every once in a while Hoopla does. But so those are the three resources that we have there.
I encourage you all, if you get the time, stop in at one of these different book clubs, because think of it this way: how many of you have had everybody tell you got to go see this movie? This is the best movie ever. You got to go see this, and you go and you think, good grief, what were they drinking that night, right? I mean, and it's fascinating when you go to a book club. What you get is you get other people's perspective on the author and the story. And it is. Some people, it will be just their cup of tea, and they think, that's the best story I've ever read on early 20th century U.S.
Right.
And living during that period of time. And somebody else will say, I didn't get it. Well, then that conversation takes place, and that's how people learn.
It is how people learn.
And it really is. It gets to be a lot of fun when you're discussing a topic. It's not, okay, tonight we're going to page 32 and let's read this paragraph. That's not what it is. It's more, bringing people together and discussing, what you've read, and bringing all of your knowledge to the table as well. So I encourage you, if you get a chance to participate, please do so.
Yes. Yeah. And most times the libraries do have copies of the book available there. I do provide the resources there on our post, just in case somebody can't make it to the library and pick it up, but they still want to read it. Great. So, but we usually have those extra copies here.
Great.
The next thing, it kind of goes into a shocking factor, but and it shocked me to read this statistic, is that 30% of women globally, experience violence in their lifetime. To put that into bigger perspective, is 1 in 3 women experience this in their lifetime. 1 in 3. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 women here. So the chances are one of those, if not 1.5 of them, have experienced violence in their lifetime. So that's the kind of scary thing. So, and this is something that the World Health Organization put out as a report. So to kind of help, not combat, but to give women an idea of how to protect themselves, their loved ones, and how to form a plan of action to keep themselves safe and to avoid looking like a easy target, we are actually holding a women's personal safety health class, or personal safety class here with Doug Krantz on Monday, September 23rd from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Great.
So yeah, he will give them all kinds of tips on how to protect themselves and all of that. So registration is required for that. You can do that by visiting our calendar of events, or you can call the library here at Camdenton, because this is where it's going to be at, is the Camdenton Library at 573-346-5954.
Great.
So
great.
Not to go on a lighter note now.
Yeah.
How's your singing voice?
Not very good.
Not very good?
Well, I generally find that the more cocktails I have, the better I sound. It's kind of like my piano playing, same thing.
To yourself or to others?
Well, don't ask my wife, okay?
Have you ever do you know who sings this? And then told, good, let them?
No.
Okay, good. You're ahead then.
Good.
The Osage Beaches Library is holding a karaoke night at the library on Wednesday, September 25th from 6:30 to 8:30. That's why I was asking how your singing voice was. I didn't know if you wanted to go up there and join them or not. That's really close.
Well, I'll make you all a promise. I won't go to that one, all right? I'll let you break that one in first, and then we'll go from there, all right? Yeah.
Not a problem. Registration on that is appreciated. You don't have to, but they would appreciate that if you did. And again, you can do that by visiting our website at ccld.us and then clicking on our calendar of events and then searching for that event.
I'll say this about it. I've been to several of these karaoke events all through the lake area, and it always astounds me. Here's some little, mom, a soccer mom with 3 kids, and she steps up there and just blows everybody out of their chairs, and you're thinking, where has she been?
Exactly.
And it is amazing the talent that's out there. And
And we do joke, like I said,
Oh, yeah.
we do joke. Most people do not have that singing voice, but there are those ones out
Oh,
there
my
that
goodness.
do,
Yeah.
that, like you said, that just blow you away, and you're
Oh.
like, whoa.
where did this come from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, unbelievable. Yeah. A lot of fun.
It
A lot of
is.
fun.
It is.
Yeah.
So like I said, registration for that is appreciated. You can either do it through the calendar link, or you can do it by calling them at 573-348-3282.
Great.
So the next is Halloween is just right around the corner.
Woohoo.
Hard to believe.
Yeah.
Very hard to
know.
believe. So to get us prepared for the spooky season, the Camdenton Library is offering 2 different competitions. One is decorating a pumpkin, and please, when you decorate your pumpkin, no puncturing it and no carving it. They get a little stinky,
Yeah.
just a little bit. But you can use markers, paint, fabric, construction paper to decorate that pumpkin, and you can bring it in. We have entry forms for that. Please do not put your name on it. We will assign it a number, and then we let the public vote on that. We do have 4 different age groups that you can enter into. It's ages 4 to 6, ages 7 to 11, ages 12 to 18, and adults 19
Hey.
plus.
So I ought to get busy.
It should. It'll be interesting in here, because then we do have a bunch of pumpkins that are in here, and they're all decorated, and they're cute. It's amazing. Last year we had one. I think it was last year. They decorated one, and it looked like a hot air balloon.
Oh, awesome.
It was neat. It was very fascinating, because I
idea.
was like, well, what is it? And then I got to look at it. I'm like, oh, it's a hot air balloon.
Nice.
So
nice.
and we had BB-8 in here, the little round ball-looking thing from Star Wars.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. Cool.
Somebody did that. We had one. They did characters from Pagemaster
Nice.
with Macaulay Culkin. That was very cool. They had the little book fairy, and then they had the grumpy. Oh my goodness, I can't think of the little
So
character.
the sky's the limit.
It is very much the sky is the limit. Whatever you
Okay.
can design on it,
Great.
go for it. But again, no
Great.
carved or punctured.
Yes.
We will not keep
Okay.
those.
Okay. Great.
The second contest that we have going on at the Camdenton Library is our Halloween costume contest. So come in your costume. Please keep it appropriate. And we will take your picture. And again, the public votes on that. So
Great.
yeah.
Great.
And all these are done October 1st through the 31st.
Awesome.
And then voting will happen November 1st through the 9th. And we'll announce winners on November 12th. I know that's a lot of information to take in,
Yeah.
but all this can be found on our calendar of events.
Great.
Or even if you follow us, make sure you follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Those are constantly on our feeds. So there is that. The last event that I have is the Sunrise Beach is going to start a board game club, basically, starting October 5th on Saturdays from 10 to noon. So if you're bored, go up there and play a board game. They're going to
There
have
you
Yahtzee, Battleship, Scrabble, and then
Great.
if you have one at home that you don't think that they have up there and you want to share it with somebody else, bring it up there, play it.
Great.
So
Great.
that's that.
Awesome.
I do have a question for you.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
What are we doing next month?
That's a good question. You know,
Not to put you on the spot.
I've been asked that a lot in this last few weeks, not just for this, but for some of the other things I'm doing with the elections coming up. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe I might do something on a little bit of the history of the elections here in the United States and some of the funny things that have happened. And
That would be an interesting-
people throw a lot of mud at one another, and I can tell you right now, what happens today is nothing compared to what it used to be. To give you just a hint, Abraham Lincoln, he had 4 brothers-in-law that all were Southerners, and because Mary Todd was a Southerner.
Right.
And they asked one of the brother-in-laws one time what he thought about Lincoln, and he said he's the greatest scoundrel left unhung. So,
Well,
yeah, so.
Interesting.
Yes, and it went into pretty much a death spiral from there, you know.
I can imagine.
So, you know, when it comes to slinging mud, believe me, and I thought maybe that might be a fun one to do since we'll be
that'd be interesting.
right around the time of the elections. All sorts of fascinating things here in Missouri. You had to go to your courthouse and stand in front of the judge and tell everybody publicly who you were voting for. that was a rule, which would be interesting
That's a little
today, wouldn't it?
intimidating.
Yeah, but that's the way it worked, you know. But the good thing about it is they set up liquor stands all around, and it was free booze. And
Is this before or after you told?
before?
Okay.
Of course, you
So-
know, and then, you know, go ahead and vote now, you know, and you were good to go. So I don't know, I'm toying with that idea, but
I kinda
there's a
like that
lot of
idea,
things
though.
happening in the world. It may be a different topic, but right now that's kind of where I'm
Well,
leaning.
we can always announce it on our social media
Absolutely,
pages.
we'll let you
So-
know for sure. Thank you so much. You did a
Thank
great
you.
job
Well,
today.
thank you. I appreciate
I
that.
enjoyed having you.
Thank
know,
you.
so
I can come back next month.
you can come back next month. Okay. Yeah.
October 17th.
Okay, October 17th. Well, thank you, folks. We really appreciate you all taking the time to be with us this morning. And if you have ideas for shows, by all means, please let us know. Drop us a note. Let us know. We're really happy to do this, and I think it's probably a big benefit for the public. Again, don't forget that you can go to any of your local libraries, and they've pulled books on the topics that we cover. Do your own research. Like I say,
Exactly.
critical thinking, that's the key. Don't let everybody else tell you what to think.
That's right.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.